Welcome back to another episode of Science with Sam and Stacey. Today, Stacey has a crazy, awesome experiment all about buoyancy. She's got a lot going on, and I had a ton of fun with it. So, before we get started though, I have a book that I think that you'll really like. It's called The Book of Potentially Catastrophic Science. It's by Sean Connolly. He writes a lot of different books. He's got one about math and experiments with that, sports experiments. Though the weather's not so great today, maybe it is when you guys are watching this. So check out those books for sure. I'll drop a link into the description so you can find those on our e-library. And we'll go on to the video. Let's see what Stacey's got for us.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Science with Sam and Stacey. Today we're going to explore why some things float and some things don't. Okay, so if we're going to look at why some things float and some things don't, let's start our experiment with three similar things. I have three bouncy balls. This one's a tiny bit squishy, this one's a tiny bit squishy, and this one is a little more firm. But otherwise, they all weigh about the same. They all bounce about the same. I'm going to guess they're all going to react the same way when I put them in water. Do you think we're all going to float, or do you think they're all going to sink? Let's start with the soccer ball. That's a sinker. Let's go with the colorful ball. Oh, that one sunk really fast. It even bounced off the bottom. So this one, I think my hypothesis, my best guess is that it's going to sink. It hit the bottom, but it is not sinking. So now why would one ball float and the other two sink? Well, that comes down to exactly what we're talking about. Buoyancy and gravity are two forces. Gravity pulls things down, and buoyancy pushes things up. What makes things float or sink is their density. So that means that the tiny molecules that make up this ball are further apart than the tiny molecules that make up this ball. Okay, so we were talking about density and how close together molecules are. The air, just like water, has a density to it, and anything that has less density is going to float, and anything with more density is going to sink, would be pulled down by gravity. So I have three balloons here. They all originally weigh the same, meaning they have the same amount of mass to them. But what happens when we let them go at the same time? 3, 2, 1, go. What happened there? It turns out this balloon and this balloon, they have the same mass, but this one has no air inside, so it's quite dense. This one's stretched out, so there's more air between the molecules, so it sunk slower. Now, what happened to the one that went up? Oh, this guy is filled with a gas called helium. Helium has less density than air, meaning that the molecules in there are spread further apart, meaning it wants to go up. Okay, so depending on density, some things will float, some things will sink, depending on if they're more or less dense than what they're in, like the air or the water. Now, how can the same material float and sink? Let's take a look at tinfoil. This is just a piece of tinfoil. If I lie it on top, it's floating. But if I let it sink to the bottom, it stays sunk. It is definitely more dense than the water because it is falling to the bottom. But if we ball it up, it's going to float. Why would that be? If you look real close, this balled up piece of tinfoil actually has little lines in it, which means there's tiny pockets of air. And those tiny pockets of air are giving it space to be less dense than the water, whereas the flat piece had no air in it. And things like metal, that's what boats are made of, which is very heavy. But if we've put it into the right shape, like this little boat I've made, it actually holds more air, meaning that it's harder to sink. So our tinfoil boat, made of the same thin material that sank to the bottom, can now support weight. So it's holding up one rock. Let's see how many rocks it can hold. That's 2. Oh, 3 rocks, and the boat is sunk. All right, so now you've got a little bit of information about how to tell if things are going to float or sink based on how kind of heavy and how dense they are. So look around your house, see what you've got. I have a cup sitting upright. Will it sink or float? It's floating. Now, is this because it's holding air, or do you think it's because the material itself is less dense? You can find out by pushing it underwater. Will it rise back to the top, or will it sink? Oh, that one wants to float. Wax crayon? You might have some of these lying around. Sink or float? That's a sinker. This is a white eraser. It's kind of soft, kind of rubbery. Sink or float? That's a sink one. This is a milk jug lid. It's kind of the shape of a boat. I bet if I put it in like this, it'll float. Yep. Now what happens if I sink it? That one's floating as well. Let's see. This little guy, he's also plastic. He's kind of a hard plastic. Do you think he'll act the same as the cups and the lid, or will he sink? Let's find out. He sunk. Nice little squid. This is a Minecraft squid. Let's see what he does. He's also kind of a harder plastic. Sink! Looks like I got lots of sinkers here. Marble? Sink. My surprise one? Float. So take a look around your house, see what you can find, make a chart, see if you can prove your guess is right or wrong.
Wow, that was a crazy experiment, hey? I really liked when Stacey at the end was just dropping different things she found around her house into the bucket to see if it would sink or float. Some of the things that I thought would float definitely did. Some of the things that I was like, that will sink for sure, like that bouncy ball. Pretty crazy. Anyways, what do you have around your house that you could try and see if it could sink? You could try, I don't think Stacey did any real glass ones. That might be kind of cool. Probably not paper. I don't think paper would be very good for this experiment. But she tried tinfoil, so you could see if you get some parchment paper. Probably not food either. I don't know. You guys are smart. You'll figure it out. Anyways, thanks for joining us for another episode of Science with Sam and Stacey. Bye.